Welcome to I24 News. You're watching Middle East Now. I'm Bianca Zanini. Tonight's broadcast is all about one man's plan for the region. With less than 2 weeks in office, U.S. President Donald Trump is not holding back, saying the U.S. will take over Gaza and deport Palestinians to neighboring Arab countries, reigniting plans for Israeli-Saudi normalization, and reimposing his maximum pressure campaign on Iran. Tonight on Middle East Now. The U.S. will take over Gaza, turn it into the Riviera of the Middle East. Meanwhile, the Palestinians living there should be relocated to neighboring countries. President Donald Trump did not hold back on his thoughts for the future of Gaza as he met with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu yesterday at the White House. Trump's comments were not off the cuff. These were prepared statements. Described as outlandish, his plans drew headlines and criticism around the world. And even Netanyahu himself seemed a little surprised, although perhaps satisfied. I24 News' Alex Schloss has more in this report.
As talks commence on the second phase of a Gaza ceasefire, plans for Gaza's reconstruction are now taking center stage. U.S. President Donald Trump is quadrupling down on controversial plans to empty the Gaza Strip of its Palestinian population while transforming it into, quote, the Riviera of the Middle East.
As far as Gaza is concerned, we'll do what is necessary. If it's necessary, we'll do that. We're going to take over that piece, and we're going to develop it, create thousands and thousands of jobs, and it'll be something that the entire Middle East can be very proud of. I think this is an idea that's gotten tremendous, and I'm talking about from the highest level of leadership, gotten tremendous praise. And if the United States can help to bring stability and peace in the Middle East, we'll do that. Bibi?
I mentioned again tonight our three goals, and the third goal is to make sure that Gaza never poses a threat to Israel again. President Trump is taking it to a much higher level. He has a different idea, and I think it's worth paying attention to this. We're talking about it. He's exploring it with his people, with his staff. I think it's something that could change history.
While some in Israel's far right, including former National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir, have hailed the American plan, Trump's comments have drawn harsh criticisms from around the world, including from some voices inside his own Republican Party.
I think most South Carolinians would probably not be excited about sending Americans to take over Gaza. It might be problematic.
And of course, Hamas slamming the plan, which would effectively place the United States in control of its historic base of power, calling it ridiculous and absurd.
These statements reflect confusion and deep ignorance about Palestine and the region. Gaza is certainly not a common land, and it is not a property that can be bought and sold.
While details about how the Trump proposal will be pursued remain unclear, what is certain is that discussions over the future of Gaza's reconstruction and governance are no longer hypothetical, with the new U.S. administration pushing for a permanent resolution to the conflict.
And joining me now in the studio is Dan Perry, International Affairs Analyst and former Europe and Middle East Editor at the Associated Press, and I24 News correspondent Balir Sladin. Now, I want to start with you, Dan. However Trump puts it, the idea of sending away the Gazan population is not very likely, at least as it stands right now. Is this an actual proposal that he's serious about, or could it be more of a negotiation tactic?
I can't read the mind of Trump, but he's such a professional disruptor. I mean, he goes into office and immediately begins disrupting everything from the World Health Organization to the Paris Accord to FEMA to just everything. It looks like he figured out that the Middle East, unlike maybe some of the things I mentioned, really is ripe for disruption. And whatever was happening here, the paradigm that has driven things for the past many decades wasn't working or leading anywhere good. If the ceasefire is carried out to its logical conclusion and Israel gets back to hostages, Hamas remains in power in Gaza, and that's a recipe for disaster. The Arab countries enabling of this has been craven and cowardly and needs to change. So I suspect that Trump, ignorant though many people think he might be, knows that it's rather unlikely that the Palestinians, who are truly obsessed with clinging to the land of Palestine, are going to voluntarily get up by the millions and actually leave. I mean, some may leave, of course. And I've said that jailing them in Gaza is wrong, and people who want to leave should be allowed to leave. But that the world should engineer a mass exodus is not going to happen. But two things might happen. One, this might save Netanyahu's coalition, because the far right that had been threatening to depart over the ceasefire and the outcome I mentioned of the war ending and Hamas remaining in power, now has a difficult time abandoning Netanyahu when their long-held dream of the Palestinians disappearing is maybe not realistic in my view.
But at least being talked about.
It was being talked about by the U.S. president.
Yeah.
I mean, it can't leave. And Netanyahu may, amazingly, live to see 2026 in power. You know, Napoleon wanted lucky generals. Israel has the luckiest politician on the planet. That this could actually happen. The second thing is that the Arabs, shocked by all this, the Arab countries, might be moved to alter their position on many things, including, for example, to really put the squeeze on Hamas, but really, and condition tens of billions of dollars in aid and Hamas stepping aside in favor of something else. And I think that actually may happen. And it's a bit reminiscent of the 2020 Abraham Accords, where the UAE and Bahrain that once were saying, well, we will only make peace with Israel in exchange for Palestinian statehood, actually did it for something less, which was Israel not annexing the West Bank as threat.
Right, because that was talked about right before that.
And now I could see Saudi Arabia making peace in exchange for this outlandish idea being pushed aside.
You mentioned annexation. I want to talk to you about this, because one of the things that Trump mentioned was that in the next 4 weeks, the U.S. is going to give its official position on possible annexation on parts of the West Bank. 4 weeks, that's about the time that the second phase of the deal is supposed to take place. Is this another way of perhaps giving a carrot or promising something for the Netanyahu coalition in order to, as part of a bigger deal, in order to pass this, move it forward?
Well, we can interpret everything as it would, benefit Netanyahu or not benefit Netanyahu politically. But there is something bigger, I guess, in this. And 4 weeks in 4 weeks, just a short time in which the Trump administration will have to announce their official position on the annexation of the West Bank. That's a huge thing. We're talking about territory of 2,000 square miles, which is 4 times bigger than Gush Dan, the greater Tel Aviv. It's not an easy task to give Israel a green light to actually do that. I don't think that there will be any annexation for all the territory, but maybe we will go back to the deal of the century that Trump has talked about throughout his first term, in which Israel will take over or impose sovereignty on the settlements of the Israeli communities inside the West Bank and also in the Jordan Valley, and then
or at least some of the biggest ones, like the Ariel
at least
one.
Some of the biggest ones.
The biggest ones are the ones that are closest to the Green Line.
Yes,
where
exactly.
The border would move just a few kilometers, and again, from a Trumpian real estate perspective, it looks reasonable. And for that, the right wing would do almost anything. And again, it saves Netanyahu's coalition.
Do you think that this is something that we could actually see?
It could be that the Trump administration would give a green light for it, and the Israeli right wing wouldn't say no, even though that this is not their ultimate goal. Their ultimate goal is to annex all the territory. But that absolutely would save his coalition, as Dan is mentioning here, and that's one more step into the idea of ending the Palestinian issue for the Israelis in general. That's absolutely something that the Israeli right would absolutely be pleased and welcome to see.
All right. Now, reportedly, former White House senior advisor and President Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, was heavily involved in Trump's plans for the U.S. to take over Gaza and clear it of Palestinians. Meanwhile, the proposal, of course, has sparked outrage among Arab nations. Here's more.
The U.S. will take over the Gaza Strip.
Donald Trump's bombshell announcement of his plans to take over and own Gaza after resettling Palestinians outside the Strip has sparked outrage across the Arab world. His vision of Gaza as an American Riviera of the Middle East goes directly against Palestinian aspirations for statehood in Gaza, the West Bank, and East Jerusalem. Many Palestinians also see all of so-called historic Palestine, including modern Israel, as their homeland.
Even airstrikes couldn't force them to leave. Do they really think they could force them to leave? Not in their wildest dreams. We shall not leave our land even if they brought all the tanks in the world.
In Ramallah, Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas strongly rejected Trump's plan.
This land is a Palestinian land. It's the international law. It's the Arab Peace Initiative. We are against any occupation, whether Israeli occupation or American occupation. We are living in our country, in our state, in our land, and we will not leave forever.
Trump's announcement on Tuesday came as a shock to many, as he had previously only floated relocating Gazans to Egypt and Jordan. Both countries have vehemently rejected the idea, though Trump insists they will do it. He also claimed Saudi Arabia didn't demand a Palestinian state as a condition for normalizing ties with Israel. But Riyadh swiftly denied that, saying its position was non-negotiable and not subject to compromises. And while Saudi Arabia stopped short of directly condemning Trump's new Gaza plan, it responded by rejecting any Israeli settlement policies, land annexation, or attempts to displace the Palestinian people from their land.
Joining us now is Ahmed Fouad Al-Khatib, analyst and senior fellow at the Atlantic Council, to discuss the Gazan perspective here. Everybody's talking about the future of Gaza, and yet the voices of the people there, the Gazans, are often overheard. I want to thank you for joining us here this evening. What are you hearing from the population there?
Thanks for having me. What I'm hearing is that people are frustrated that they do want to see Gaza, their homeland, their space, where the area they've called home for generations, be prosperous, be well, be developed, be the pride and joy of the Palestinian people. On the other hand, they're frustrated that the Trump administration is having to resort to these sort of threats as a mere negotiating tactics to get the Arab and the international community involved. They see themselves as being mere pawns on the one hand in the hands of Hamas, which has unleashed this destructive episode upon the Palestinian people at the behest of the so-called of the axis of resistance. On the other hand, they see the failure of the Arab world, the international community, to really pressure a new reality onto the scene, and they've ceded. They feel that they've become pawns, unfortunately. On the other hand, I think a lot of people feel that, yes, these are empty threats. There's no way the United States is going to send troops to take over the Gaza Strip and to do what the Israeli military has failed to do. However, this further erodes the position of the United States in the region at a time when I think there's an opportunity for the United States to fill the void that exists now as a result of the weakening of Hezbollah, the collapse of the Assad regime, the retreat of Iran. And so it's a really unfortunate development that's entirely unnecessary.
So you don't see it as in any way strengthening the role of the U.S., but only eroding it and making it less powerful with a move like this?
Precisely that. And this is especially important, contextually speaking, when so many in Gaza and indeed in the region feel that the United States, through its military assistance to Israel, even if one wants to think that was warranted, fueled this conflict with endless support in the form of military assistance and bombs. I mean, the United States, a lot of these unexploded munitions are U.S. bombs, many of which are so-called dumb bombs, the unguided munitions. And that's why they have a high dud rate, if you will, because many of them have been in storage for decades. And so there is this kind of bizarre twist in which Mr. Trump framed his remarks as a benevolent act that the United States wants to remove the rubble, wants to remove the unexploded munitions, wants to help transform the place, which again, Gazans themselves would love to see that and would love to have this actually be Gaza's final war. On the other hand, Gazans should be there when the place is transformed. And I mean, it's offensive to them to suggest that they should not be in the place that is going to be transformed on their behalf.
All right, Ahmed, stay with us. I want to bring in our studio guests to the conversation. It's very easy to dismiss this statement by Donald Trump. We've also heard from Egypt, from Jordan, saying that it's not going to happen. But isn't it also dangerous to just ignore it? I mean, if this is something that he really wants to go after, is there any way he can actually make it happen?
I don't think the U.S. is going to impose anything or, punish anyone, although who knows? It's conceivable that if Trump is serious about wanting Egypt to set up, tent cities or shanty towns in the northern Sinai for the Palestinians, temporarily or permanently, and they refuse categorically, as I think they're inclined to do, because there is an obsession in Egypt about not solving Israel's Gaza problem for it, then maybe he could condition military aid reductions, a continuation of military aid on some kind of acquiescence. Similarly with Jordan, he has certain leverage against Qatar, but I can't see it. I really can't see the U.S. going to the mat and really disrupting its relationship with the entire Arab world, which is valuable to the U.S.
Right.
For this rather outlandish plan. As said, I think it's really more of a negotiating tactic. I do wonder, though. I think Palestinian opinion is not irrelevant, and I think our guests may be able to answer this. If it were temporary, and if, given the truth of Trump's statement that Gaza really is kind of unlivable right now, I mean, maybe because of Israel's bombardment with U.S. help. Funny how that never came up. But yeah, it's horrible. Rational people would want to leave, at least temporarily. I wonder if they had some kind of guaranteed right to return, and I know that's a big if, and I know these issues...
It's also a complicated phrasing of words, the right of return.
Yes, but if, putting narratives aside, putting psychology and politics aside, putting threats from Hamas aside, I would ask, if there was a plan to rebuild Gaza while people moved elsewhere for 3 to 5 years, and they had the guarantee that they could then go back, how many would go?
Well, let's bring in our guest, Ahmed, for this question. We've heard Donald Trump saying that, they're going to return to rubble and they're going to return to a very insecure future, very unclear who is going to be their leadership, how long it's going to take to rebuild, who is going to help finance that rebuilding. Is there a part of the population that would be open to relocating temporarily, or is it just a bigger, is it too big for anyone to accept that right now?
Listen, to be fair, I'm going to start with talking about myself. I got my mom is out. I got some of my family out. I got my brother's wife and children out. And I think those who want, and my brother is still there, and so are many of my surviving uncles. I lost dozens of immediate and extended family as well in this war. So I believe strongly that those who want the option to leave should have that at their disposal. Who am I or any of us in the safety of our homes to impose that Gazans and Palestinians should remain against their will? That said, I'm willing to estimate, based on my constant contact with folks in Gaza and family members and people, that at least 2/3 of the people of Gaza would not leave if given a chance to leave, because they feel strongly.
Even temporarily.
Even temporarily, yes, because they want to rebuild their homes. They want to rebuild their lives. They don't want to cede it to the Israelis, to the settlers, to Hamas, to the Americans. This is their home. They feel that they've been displaced from, historic Palestine, and that this is their last opportunity to have what resembles an area that could be part of a future Palestinian nation. And so the unfortunate thing, and I really cannot understate how significant this was, immediately after the horrendous October 7 attack, we had a whole avalanche of statements coming out of Israel, from Israeli media, from Israeli ministers, saying the transfer scenario, we're going to do a second Nakba, we're going to push them out. That was not maybe Israeli formal policy, but what that did in Cairo in particular is it terrified, and it terrified the Arab street, that this will become yet another opportunity to further expel the Palestinian people. And so this notion of temporary relocation lost any credibility, because there was the belief that, okay, fine, they're going to tell us it's temporary, but we have all statements to look back to. And unfortunately, the way Mr. Trump just presented this proposal and said that the people of the world will live in Gaza, that is not only a guarantee, that is in a sense a guarantee that people in Gaza will not return. So I support an option to temporarily get folks out, but that has been significantly degraded with the way that Mr. Trump spoke about this yesterday.
All right, Ahmed Fouad Al-Khatib, thank you very much for your input.
Thank you.
Now, another of Trump's headline-grabbing comments, saying that Saudi Arabia has not made the establishment of a Palestinian state a condition for normalization with Israel. Riyadh has denied this, reiterating its firm and unwavering support for a Palestinian state before negotiations can happen on a deal with Israel. Now, joining me is Dr. Yoel Guzansky, a senior fellow at the INSS and a Gulf politics and security expert. I'll start by asking you about the timing of this. Is now the best time to push for normalization? It seems a little bit rushed with the Gaza war still very fresh and potentially erupting again. On the other hand, it is clearly a key part of moving to the next phases, certainly the last one. Is this the only time, the best time to dive into the subject?
Well, if you ask some of Bibi's coalition partners, they will say no, that's not the best time. And if you ask the Saudis, I think they will say to you that this is not the best time, because the further the war is continuing, and we saw it since October 7th, development actually, they have not changed but developed their position vis-a-vis a Palestinian state, vis-a-vis normalization with Israel. What they demand now, and just waited hours after the Trump announcement yesterday at the press conference, and immediately the Saudi Foreign Ministry issued a statement that no one will mistake the Saudi position is supporting a Palestinian state, and this is a precondition to normalization with Israel. So if you ask the Saudis, this is not the best time. Normalization with Israel is not in their cards right now. Things should develop and happen beforehand. If you ask me, I think the Saudis understand that a Palestinian state right now is not feasible. It's not something that can happen tomorrow. They understand that. They're not new to the region. But I think they want all kinds of measures and not just statements, but actions from Israel to help materialize the option of a Palestinian state. They want to be seen, and the image is crucial for them. They want to be seen as the ones who gave birth to a Palestinian state.
All right. Dr. Yoel Guzansky, stay with us. I want to bring in our guests here in the studio. It seems that when Trump says that he wants to relocate Gazans, is he actually giving the Saudis sort of a way out or a way to step down from that ladder? We heard here from Dr. Yoel Guzansky that this is they want to be the name behind a Palestinian state, but now where there's talk of another full forced deportation from Gaza, perhaps they can say, okay, well, we didn't get you a Palestinian state just yet, but we prevented this from happening, and so we can move ahead with the deal.
Well, that's exactly what he did with the Emiratis, that everybody was talking about the annexation of the Jordan Valley, and the Emiratis stepped in, and they said that we saved, actually.
So can he do that with the Saudis and
I personally don't think so. I think that the Saudis see themselves as the leaders of the Arab world and the Muslim world, and they could not actually neglect the Palestinian issue. They will always require Israel to give any guarantees for a Palestinian state, let's say, even if it's not a Palestinian state. By the way, just a short while ago, a source in the Saudi in Saudi Arabia said that we are requiring a Palestinian state with the east of Jerusalem as its capital. That's something that, of course, Israel will not agree to, at least not this current government. But I would say that if we talk to them, not formally and, not in front of the screens and the microphones and everything, they will say that they just it's too much after all of these years that the Palestinian issue is still the main issue in the Arab world, that they cannot continue with their plans with the Americans, with the Israelis, of course, to integrate in the region, to counter Iran, to maybe realize the 2030 plan for them because of the Palestinian issue. So they would actually would love to normalize the relations with Israel and get the strategic plan agreement with the Americans, but that cannot happen because of the Saudi public. Most of them hate Israel, especially after October 7th, and that will not give the Saudi Crown Prince the legitimacy to announce such a thing.
All right, I want to go back to our guest, Dr. Yoel Guzansky. Apart from creating a Palestinian state, is there any steps less than that the Saudis could accept right now? For instance, a pathway for it to happen in the future, or does it need to be more than a loose plan that we've seen before, essentially?
The answer is yes, but we need to wrap it. They will need to wrap it. Trump, together with Israelis, will need to wrap it in a way that will enable the Saudis to say, "Oh, look what we brought. We brought something that no one else succeeded." Listen, the images that coming out of Gaza right now after the ceasefire are making actually more hard for the Saudis to be pragmatic. In the Saudi public opinion, as your correspondent said, right, very rightly, and in the Arab public opinion. And what Trump said yesterday and in the last few days, again, are also making it hard for the Saudis to show flexibility and pragmatism, because what they do, and they just corner the Saudis, push them to the corner and make them go hand in hand and show sympathy with the Palestinian. Even if they don't want to, what Trump said and what Bibi said with him, that's the paradox, actually make it harder for the Saudis to show flexibility. So the more you talk about the issue, the more it's harder for the Saudis to show flexibility.
All right, that's an interesting take. Dr. Yoel Guzansky, thank you very much for joining us this evening. We have about 30 seconds left. I just want to get a quick answer from you guys. Are we any closer than we have been since the war began to reaching a Saudi deal?
One word, no. We're not.
What about you?
Yeah, I have the same word.
No?
But I would add, since it seems I have 50 seconds,
yeah.
that there is a Rubik's Cube of things here that a clever diplomat, which Trump may or may not be, can use. That involves Iran, Saudi, annexation. There's a lot of things that you can do here.
All right, we're going out for a short break, but when we'll come back, we'll talk about Trump's maximum pressure campaign on Iran. Much more when we're back.
Bad posture. The ever-increasing hours we spend sitting, working, and even while trying to relax at home is twisting our vertebrae out of alignment and creating strain and pain on muscles, ligaments, and joints. A scientifically designed spine and back support device that uses precision biometric technology to perfectly align the back and spine for all-day comfort and support, creating perfect posture for your back every time you sit down. Now features extra-wide acupressure comfort pads as well as an extended height back panel for even more support, making it perfect for all body types. Also features a precision wing design that perfectly cradles your back and spine with amazing ergonomic support that leaves you feeling refreshed and energized even after sitting all day.
You live in Israel or you are preparing for your Aliyah? Congratulations. You have a smartphone? Perfect. Download the Olim app for free and discover everything we have to offer. Booking medical and administrative appointments, bills paying, debt verification, instant translation, contractor recommendation, request tracking, and much more. And if you can't manage it on your own, our team speaks your language and assists you with all your procedures in Israel, starting from 199 shekels per month, unlimited and for the whole family. Don't hesitate any longer. Download the app or contact us.
Welcome back to Middle East Now. I'm Bianca Zanini. Former Defense Minister Yoav Gallant has spoken out in an interview to Hebrew media, accusing Netanyahu of delaying a deal with Hamas that would have ensured the return of more hostages. Yesterday, Hamas announced that talks on the second phase of the ceasefire, which is set to happen in March, have begun according to plan. Meanwhile, Trump's announcement to relocate Palestinians from Gaza, as we spoke about before the break, have been met with criticism in the Arab world, with support from many Israeli politicians, but with hesitation from the families of the hostages still being held in Gaza, who worry that these statements could put a stop to the ceasefire deal and prevent the hostages from coming home. We go now live to Hostages Square, where our reporter Robert Swift is live for us. Rob, what more can you tell us?
So regarding the interview with former Defence Minister Yoav Gallant that you refer to, there was some interesting information that fell out of this. Now, obviously, Gallant is an arch political rival to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, and his comments on the Prime Minister obviously come within that context. But people will take note of the fact that he said that the deal, which has been enacted in the last few weeks, it was first put on the Cabinet's table for discussion in April 2024, with that deal being hashed out in a form that was ready to implement, according to Yoav Gallant, by the summer. Now, additionally, he also said that there was at least 110 names of Palestinians serving life sentences who have been released, names that were not on the list in the summer when Gallant had been looking at it, who were subsequently released as part of this deal. Now, in short, Gallant is saying the deal is not as good as it would have been if it had been done earlier. Now, with regard to the second point you make, with the reaction of the hostages' families to the comments by US President Donald Trump, I think there's 2 points that are very telling. The first one is the fact that there was a press conference that had been advertised to take place where members of the hostages' families at the White House were going to discuss the comments being made by the Prime Minister and by the US President. That press conference was due to happen immediately afterwards. When Donald Trump came out with his comments about evacuating Gazans from Gaza, that press conference was cancelled. I think that goes to show the level of confusion that came towards the president's words. Now, just a little bit earlier this evening, I had a chat with one of the hostages' families. A mother whose son is inside Gaza currently, and she wouldn't go on record. She didn't want to talk openly about this because she said that, in her words, her main feelings towards the president's comments are confusion. She doesn't exactly understand what this truly means, specifically for those hostages still inside Gaza and for what it means for the direction of the war, and concern. She said that she is concerned about what impact this will have on the hostages still inside the Gaza Strip, whether it means that Hamas will delay or make more complicated the release of the hostages this Saturday or subsequently, or even if it will have a slightly more long-term effect, making the transition from phase 1 of the current ceasefire to phase 2, making that yet much more difficult and making the return to all-out war in Gaza more likely.
All right, Robert Swift, thank you very much. Now, still with me in the studio is Dan Perry, International Affairs Analyst. Dan, we heard Rob here mention how this could potentially affect the way Hamas decides to release the hostages. Whether or not this is something that will actually move forward, do you see a scenario where Hamas does release all the hostages and keeps its part of the deal and essentially signs its own goodbye letter?
No, I think the deal that has already been agreed, for all the talk of more negotiations, is that basically by the beginning of March, all the hostages are released and Israel pulls out of all of the Gaza Strip and ends the war. Does that mean a death warrant for Hamas? You could argue that means a victory parade for Hamas, because whatever the ruination in Gaza, in their twisted mindset, the fact that they're still somehow in charge is the victory. And I think that is what they're going for. The concern is that the hostage families really want this to happen. This deal, frustrating though it might be with Hamas remaining in Gaza, is a deal they very much want, and there's not that much time. There's weeks left to complete it without without throwing any monkey wrenches into the equation. And Trump's proposal, which is like historically bizarre and astounding and game-changing, isn't the kind of thing that plays out in 3 weeks. And it could very much impede the implementation of the smooth implementation of this delicate and frustrating, but from their perspective, the hostage family's perspective, necessary deal. So it's a complication.
Yeah. I want to talk a little bit about, we mentioned it shortly, about what it could mean for Netanyahu's political future, because we've seen far-right Minister Smotrich threatening, he's still threatening to leave the government come the beginning of March, where the second phase of the deal is supposed to be implemented. But now maybe he will get something else. There are all these doors that seem to have opened. We talked about a potential for annexation. And at the same time, when the mother of this hostage that Robert, the correspondent Robert Swiss was mentioning, that she didn't want to say her name, but she said that she was more confused than anything and more worried.
Like everyone.
She's not the only one. What does this bode for Netanyahu? I mean, he himself seemed surprised.
He did. I don't think he ever expected the U.S. president, even one as unusual as Trump, to actually be sounding like the far right in Israel, speaking of what sounds very close to ethnic cleansing of Gaza. He clearly can't be holier than the Pope, right? He can't oppose it. But clearly this sort of music coming out of Washington has potential to cement his coalition and enable him to somehow survive the implementation of the deal. I strongly suspect that to guarantee that, you'll be hearing some version of a green light for minor Israeli annexations of some settlements close to the former border. Things like this that the far right really, really, really wants. I also think that there's a wide range of possibilities between nothing happening and business as usual, which Trump clearly wants to blow up, and full implementation of the full depopulation of Gaza, which is what was hinted at yesterday. Our previous guest from Gaza said a third of the people might want to leave. I got to tell you, I used to supervise the AP bureau in Gaza, and there was a whole community of people there, and I would go there quite often, and my assessment is at least a third would leave temporarily, maybe more, just because it's such an awful place to live in for most people, even if they feel attached to it.
Right.
So if a third leave, that's 700,000. Trump would present this as an unprecedented victory for his brinksmanship. You know, the Gaza, famously so crowded, has been cleared out of some of the people who want to leave anyway, and he will claim he implemented what now people are calling his crazy deal. Where would they go? It's absolutely true that Egypt wants no Palestinians, Jordan wants no Palestinians, but you know what? What if they go to the West Bank? And then they're not leaving Palestine. That would look different, wouldn't it?
It certainly would. We'll get back to that, but I want to bring in another of the three main topics at the top of the agenda between Trump and Netanyahu yesterday. We had Gaza, we had Saudi Arabia, and of course, Iran. Yesterday, Trump signed an executive order renewing what he calls maximum pressure on Iran to stop it from reaching nuclear capabilities, a goal that both Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu reiterated in a press conference just a short time later. More on this report from Emma Siegel.
Using words like maximum pressure and obliterate, U.S. President Donald Trump has made very clear his position on Iran.
Today, I also took action to restore a maximum pressure policy on the Iranian regime, and we will once again enforce the most aggressive possible sanctions, drive Iranian oil exports to zero, and diminish the regime's capacity to fund terror throughout the region and throughout the world.
On Tuesday, Trump said that he would like to make a deal with Iran to improve bilateral relations, but signed what he called a, quote, very tough directive restoring his sanctions campaign on Tehran in order to stop it from obtaining a nuclear weapon. But while Trump described it as a tough decision as he signed the executive order, he also added strong words against the Islamic Republic if it tried to have him assassinated.
Well, they haven't done that, and that would be a terrible thing for them to do, not because of me. If they did that, they would be obliterated. That would be the end. I've left instructions. If they do it, they get obliterated. There won't be anything left.
Later, in a presser with visiting Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, they reiterated their joint goal against a nuclear Iran.
They cannot have a nuclear weapon. It's very simple. I'm not putting restrictions. They cannot have one thing. They cannot have a nuclear weapon. And if I think that they will have a nuclear weapon, despite what I just said, I think that's going to be very unfortunate for them. If, on the other hand, they can convince us that they won't, and I hope they can, it's very easy to do. It's actually very easy to do. I think they're going to have an unbelievable future.
We also see eye to eye on Iran. That's the same Iran that tried to kill us both. They tried to kill you, Mr. President. They tried through their proxies to kill me. We're both committed to rolling back Iran's aggression in the region and ensuring that Iran never develops a nuclear weapon.
With maximum pressure restored, Trump's renewed sanctions and firm stance on Iran set the stage for what's to come in U.S. foreign policy.
And joining the conversation now is Behnam Ben Talebou, a senior fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Now, after all of this, a little bit later, in the middle of the night, Trump posted on the Truth Social platform that he wants to deal with Iran and that all of these reports that the U.S. and Israel are going to blow Iran into, quote, smithereens are greatly exaggerated. What do you make of a statement like this, a post like this, quite suddenly after everything he said before, and what reports are he referring to? Is he referring to?
Well, I think there's a tendency right now, pleasure to be with you, by the way, there's a tendency right now to project that which any particular audience, foreign or domestic, factional or political, wants from President Trump on Iran policy onto President Trump. But it's critical, I think, to let the president speak for himself, let his words speak for himself, and let the track record speak for himself. Both from when he was a candidate, as well as in term one, as well as campaigning for term two, as well as in term two now, President Trump has talked about his priority being a diplomatic resolution to the Iranian nuclear crisis. While that could be unlikely for a whole host of reasons, there's been a consistent through line there that he seeks dismantlement and disarmament of the Islamic Republic's WMD apparatus. So while others may have projected something onto him, in terms of his maximum pressure campaign, this is what he said he's been consistent in. Now, if you take a look at the presidential memorandum that was signed just the other day, that almost copy-pastes a lot of the content found in the 12 points that Donald Trump and then Secretary Pompeo floated in term one. So I would say there's a fair amount of consistency here, perhaps more consistency than meets the eye. And what we all need to be prepared for is how the adversary responds to this pressure. In term one, Iran contested this pressure. In term two, I think President Trump has to be wary because the Islamic Republic is setting a diplomatic trap for him to try to lure President Trump into negotiations, take advantage of his deal-making wish, take advantage of his desire for diplomacy over war, and try to prevent actually a wholesale dismantlement of its atomic infrastructure.
Oh, a diplomatic trap. Now, earlier today, Iran's currency, the rial, plunged to a record low of 850,000 to $1 after Trump's order. How will this maximum pressure campaign likely affect the lives of regular Iranians? And is there a risk that it might feed more anti-Western sentiment and then, hence, support for the regime?
Ironically, no, not at all, even though much of the academic literature and the political kind of hand-wringing we've seen in Western capitals and even in Washington for many years said that if you put foreign pressure on Iran, particularly macroeconomically or things that are broad-based, it would end up negatively impacting the Iranian people. What we've seen actually is that at peak periods of foreign pressure, and the case study really is the term one Trump administration, 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020, the Iranian people turned out in waves and in mass actually to cheer on that pressure, and in front of government buildings were chanting, "The enemy is here, they lie when they say it's America." So I think Donald Trump, with his maximum pressure policy, has torpedoed the conventional wisdom that foreign support as well for Iranian people and foreign pressure against the Iranian government would somehow be conflated. I think Donald Trump has a real opportunity, should he take it, to reissue maximum pressure and bolster that with maximum support to get the maximum dividend of his new Iran policy.
All right, and here finally, shortly before we let you go, however you put it though, and whoever you want to blame, The fact is that since Trump left the JCPOA and put his maximum pressure campaign on Iran, the country is closer than ever to being able to produce nuclear weapons. Why would his maximum pressure campaign strategy work this time if it essentially failed last time?
It absolutely did not fail last time. In terms of macroeconomics, you can take a look. Donald Trump did in a year and a half macroeconomically more than what a decade plus of multilateral sanctions did. It did not deliver the Iranians to the negotiating table because only a year and a half of a 4-year presidential term was used to green light this large economic coercive pressure policy. Now, you don't have to take that from me. You can also take it from the words of the government of the Islamic Republic. Once Iran's president, then Hassan Rouhani, and thrice Iran's oil minister, Mr. Bijan Namdar Zanganeh, said that the oil sanctions under Trump were more damaging than the 8-year Iran-Iraq war. This is a war that the regime itself calls the holy defense or the sacred defense. So again, you don't have to take it from me. And the biggest success thus far in term 2 is that while in 2019, Ali Khamenei, Iran's supreme leader, said that he would never negotiate with Trump, he is forced to have to do so today at the start of term 1 in 2025.
All right, Behnam Ben Taleblu, thank you very much for your insight and your analysis this evening.
Thank you.
Now, I want to bring, Dan, I want to bring you back into the discussion. Trump's stance on Iran, he says he both wants to see the country prosper, but also he wants to really implement a campaign to drive Iran's oil exports to zero. When he puts this amount of pressure and at the same time opens the door for diplomacy, what is the message that he's actually sending? Because it seems that they are not that aligned.
It's not unusual for Trump to want Iran to not have a nuclear weapon. Basically, no one on earth, including maybe most Iranians, don't want Iran to have a nuclear weapon. But the regime has been hell-bent on at least becoming a proximate nuclear weapon state, a threshold state. Trump wants them to publicly surrender this ambition, basically, without negotiation. I don't think Trump wants, as Obama had to go through, years and years of painstaking, bazaar-like negotiation. He just wants it done. Netanyahu, I think, had been hoping for some version of a green light to attack Iran's nuclear sites, for Israel to do that with maybe U.S. backing and support, but for Israel to be the executor. He didn't get that, and Trump obviously doesn't want a war with Iran. He is banking on the idea that enough pressure, maximum pressure, might get them to relent. And that pressure would have to be brutal, not just on Iran, but on Iran's potential trading partners. Because the reason why Iran's economy has not been crushed, and why, although it's been damaged, and a reason why their oil exports are not at zero is because they find markets for various things, be it drone, be it oil, with Russia, with Iran, even in
China.
With China, and even India and other countries of what Anne Applebaum called autocracy Inc. And autocracy adjacent countries. So we'll have to see if the U.S. really is prepared to put the squeeze on other countries to totally isolate Iran. But I am certainly coming around to the notion just articulated that the people of Iran would welcome this, because this is an unpopular regime and it has no legitimacy, and it really, really should fall. And the population of Iran, some may support it, especially in the hinterlands, very religious people in villages and so forth. But Iran has huge populations that aren't Persian, that aren't Muslim, that aren't religious, that are rational, they want to be part of the world community, and they may even be willing to suffer a little economically in order to bring down the regime that so torments them.
All right, Dan, stay with us. With just over 2 weeks in office, Donald Trump has shaken the Middle East. We've made that very clear in this broadcast. Yesterday was perhaps the clearest example of that, as the American president presented his views and plans for the region with stunning declarations about Gaza, Saudi Arabia, Iran. And his statements sent shockwaves through the Arab world, especially for Egypt and Jordan, who Trump insists must open their doors for Palestinians as part of a Gaza cleanup. Now, the idea is not being well received in the streets of Egypt.
He is saying things without thinking. We shouldn't rely on his words. He is an unstable man, so we will not take him seriously. The Palestinians will remain in their land, and there should be a two-state solution.
Palestinians will remain in their lands, and all the Arab nations agree that they should remain in their lands. What Riviera? They will live on the rubble of their houses, and we will fix things, remove the rubble, build them homes, build them huts made from wood or tents. They will agree to remain in their lands. They will not abandon their land.
Now, joining us now from Cairo in Egypt is Hussein Kamal Hariri, a former assistant to Egyptian Foreign Minister and former director of the Department of Israeli Affairs at the Egyptian Foreign Ministry. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. So let's jump into it. Egypt and Jordan have been very clear. They've completely rejected accepting Palestinians in Trump's plan. And Trump, yet he keeps pushing for this. He keeps saying that this should be taken seriously. Now, it isn't always being taken seriously, but what are Trump's tools here? And is there any chance he can actually push this and pressure it to make it happen? Or is it just like a complete non-starter?
When Egypt and Jordan signed their peace treaties with Israel, the first Arab countries to do so, it was quite clear that this peace was based on Security Council Resolution 242 of November 1967, which incarnates the formula of land for peace. What President Trump has been saying for the last 2 weeks really is undermining the foundations, the legal, political, and strategic foundations of peace between Egypt and Jordan on the one hand, and Israel on the other hand. And so I doubt very much that Egypt, I'll speak, I don't speak on behalf of the Egyptian government, but I'll express the public view in Egypt. Egypt would never participate in any American plan to dispossess the Palestinians of the lands of their ancestors.
Right. So tell me about this, because Jordan has 2.4 million Palestinian refugees already there. Egypt has a very complicated history with the Palestinians, but it does share a border with Gaza. It's not a completely unconventional idea that neighboring countries will take refugees from a territory in war. Why is it being so fiercely rejected here, especially from Egypt? I know it has its own complicated relationship with Islamic religious groups like the Muslim Brotherhood and Hamas and its supporters.
Well, the Egyptian position rejecting, opposing President Trump's idea of the Palestinians in Gaza going to Egypt is not related to our opposition to Islamist groups, madam. It's a question of principle for us. Palestinians are the owners of their own lands, and neither Egypt nor any other country, and for that matter, the United States, would dictate to the Palestinians how to dispense with their future. The Palestinians, when the ceasefire and hostage agreement went into effect last January, the Palestinians that were displaced from the north to the south of Gaza trekked to the north, to Gaza City. Not less than 400,000 Palestinians. The whole world saw them going by foot to ruins in their city. They want to stay on their land, and we won't be. Egypt will never accept to be party to any plan that would repeat what happened to the Palestinian refugees in 1948, madam.
Right. So it's an absolute non-starter, and it's a matter of principle for the Egyptians. Thank you very much, Hussein Kamal Hariri, for joining us this evening.
It's my pleasure, ma'am.
I want to bring us back here to the studio. Egyptians saying it's a non-starter. This is a matter of principle. At the end of the day, is there anything that Trump can do to force this to happen? Or is it, as we talked about in the very beginning of the show, a part of a negotiation? It's already known that it's not going to happen. The goal is something else.
I'm not sure I even see the will by Trump to actually force it. You know, the way he phrased it in the press conference, he suggested he's spoken to Arab countries and there's a willingness to do it. I don't know what to make of that. Look, since the beginning of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict over a century now, there have been people on both sides who dreamed of the other side somehow vanishing. You didn't need to be a crazy nationalist to think this, because, you know, even regular people might have felt the Holy Land is too small for two very stiff-necked and very different peoples, but only the crazies actually sought expulsion as a policy. I don't think that's going to change, even if Trump raises the idea, even if 700,000 somehow leave. The basic equation will remain the same. If the Arabs want to help the Palestinians, they need to make very clear that Hamas must go. They need to choke off all funding, all support, and all legitimacy for Hamas. That is the only way anything good is coming to the Palestinians, to the Gazans, and indeed to the Israelis.
All right, Dan Perry, thank you very much for your insight this evening. That's all for this broadcast of Middle East Now. We'll be back tomorrow with more news and analysis from Israel and the region.
It started on October 7th, but for many, the horror may never end. With homes destroyed, families displaced, hostages missing, soldiers fallen, and a country traumatized. In the first year alone, more than 17,000 Israelis have been wounded, and hundreds of thousands have experienced psychological trauma and need support now. Thankfully, for 112 years, Hadassah hospitals have been on the ground healing. At our expanding Gandel Rehabilitation Center, we're providing critical physical therapy and life-changing mental health services.
Hadassah is a great place.
Today I'm really thankful.
Now, some are back home, living their lives, but many more still need our help. Help your family and friends heal at Hadassah hospitals. Give today.
This innovative tool is the Fat Freezer Platinum, the first home-use fat rejection device that freezes away stubborn fat.
Like most people, I always believed that diet and exercise would be enough to reduce stubborn fat.
The Fat Freezer Platinum uses technology to freeze away stubborn fat from the comfort of your own home. To optimize results, the Fat Freezer Platinum uses TheraLight. The Fat Freezer Platinum will help you sculpt your body in exactly the way you want and keep it that way. It's safe, simple to use, and bottom line is, it really works. The Fat Freezer uses a medically known technology called cryolipolysis, used in high-end clinics all across the globe.
This is the rundown on I24 News. I'm Benita Levine. It's a shock proposal that has shaken up the political scene across the United States and across the Middle East. President Donald Trump announcing his plan for the U.S. to take over the Gaza Strip and permanently resettle its Palestinian population. He was speaking after his highly anticipated meeting with Benjamin Netanyahu in the Oval Office, the first foreign leader to meet face-to-face with the U.S. president since his new term started. The Israeli Prime Minister smiling as the U.S. leader outlined his plan to build new Palestinian settlements outside of Gaza and for the U.S. to take ownership of its development into what he calls the Riviera of the Middle East. More in this report.
As talks commence on the second phase of a Gaza ceasefire, plans for Gaza's reconstruction are now taking center stage. U.S. President Donald Trump is quadrupling down on controversial plans to empty the Gaza Strip of its Palestinian population while transforming it into, quote, the Riviera of the Middle East.
As far as Gaza is concerned, we'll do what is necessary. If it's necessary, we'll do that. We're going to take over that piece, and we're going to develop it, create thousands and thousands of jobs, and it'll be something that the entire Middle East can be very proud of. I think this is an idea that's gotten tremendous, and I'm talking about from the highest level of leadership, gotten tremendous praise. And if the United States can help to bring stability and peace in the Middle East, we'll do that. Bibi?
I mentioned again tonight our three goals, and the third goal is to make sure that Gaza never poses a threat to Israel again. President Trump is taking it to a much higher level. He has a different idea, and I think it's worth paying attention to this. We're talking about it. He's exploring it with his people, with his staff. I think it's something that could change history.
While some in Israel's far right, including former National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir, have hailed the American plan, Trump's comments have drawn harsh criticisms from around the world, including from some voices inside his own Republican Party.
I think most South Carolinians would probably not be excited about sending Americans to take over Gaza. It might be problematic.
And of course, Hamas slamming the plan, which would effectively place the United States in control of its historic base of power, calling it ridiculous and absurd.
These statements reflect confusion and deep ignorance about Palestine and the region. Gaza is certainly not a common land, and it is not a property that can be bought and sold.
While details about how the Trump proposal will be pursued remain unclear, what is certain is that discussions over the future of Gaza's reconstruction and governance are no longer hypothetical, with the new U.S. administration pushing for a permanent resolution to the conflict.
Controversial indeed. So for more, let's go live to our senior U.S. correspondent, Mike Wagenheim. He joins us from the U.S. State Department in Washington. What a day. So much speculation, Mike, about that meeting between Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu. But it seems the U.S. president's shock proposals seem to be a surprise to many, except those in his inner circle. You were actually there when the announcement was made. Tell us more.
I don't know if it was, you can call it an announcement. It's usually an announcement is sort of structured and it's prepared. This was anything but. You know, we're so used to hearing off-the-cuff remarks from President Trump that when he first said the words, "we'll own it," everybody was kind of looking around at each other, you always have to read between the lines. You always have to decipher the context and the background of what President Trump is saying at any given moment. And I'm not sure in that moment that many of the reporters, if any, kind of grasped what he was getting at that point. It just seemed like one of those things he just says and moves on from. And as he kept repeating it, for the second time, for the third time, and everybody in the room started to really process that this wasn't just an off-the-cuff remark, that this seemed to be some newfound strategy on his part. I think it started to hit, and obviously it took hold of the press conference and the news cycle going forward here into today. But just a surreal experience listening to this, what we thought was stream of consciousness, but actually, as Trump said afterward, he had vetted it apparently with his inner circle and moved forward on that premise.
As you say, many asking, is he serious? Is this for real? And some suggesting it's all just a negotiation tactic of sorts, sort of come up with something completely off the charts, out of the box, and then it puts pressure on other nations to come up with their own solution for Gaza. Tell us more.
You and I have talked about this multiple times on the Rundown and other I-24 News programming, Benita, about this Trump MO, about his negotiating tactics, where he starts with something absolutely outrageous, knowing, I think, in his mind, nobody can get in Trump's mind, but I think he knows these outrageous negotiating platforms will never be the end result, but it's a maximalist position. It requires other people to come to the table, to present counteroffers. It's a way of sending a message that he is dead serious about a particular issue, even if he's not dead serious about what he is offering as a solution at that particular moment. I have a sense that this is one of those matters that he's seeing that there is no way out at this point, that nobody's really offering a solution, that a lot of the talk in the Middle East among the Arab countries, they voice their support for the Palestinian cause, but when push comes to shove, they simply don't put in what's required to come to a solution. I think in the end, this is Trump's way of saying everybody needs to get involved here in trying to find a solution. If not, hey, we're more than happy to make Trump-a-lago there in Gaza City in the long run. It brings people into the conversation. It brings people to the table, but it's certainly sowing a lot of confusion here in the U.S., as we mentioned, even amongst his Republican colleagues. Tom Tillis, a Republican senator and avowed conservative, told reporters yesterday, quote, "I think there are a couple of kinks in that slinky." Very folksy quote, but that pretty much sums it up. There's a few problems with this particular proposal from Trump. Others say no comment. We haven't seen enough of it. Some were more flat out and saying, hey, this isn't the right solution. But again, at least it's bringing people into the conversation where they weren't before.
As you say, opposition politicians calling it offensive, some saying it's insane, dangerous, foolish. The list goes on. Certainly, as you say, the topic is on the table. Senior U.S. correspondent Mike Wagenheim, live from the State Department in Washington. Thank you, Mike. And to discuss exactly this, we now welcome to studio Danny Ayalon, former Israeli ambassador to the United States and the former Israeli deputy foreign minister and the chairman of Silver Road Capital, and security analyst Jonathan Regev. Gentlemen, thank you so much. What a day, what a moment. Some say Donald Trump is thinking outside the box, off the charts thinking. It's what the region needs. Others say he's insane. What do you make of it?
Well, they also said he was insane when he moved the embassy to Jerusalem, and they thought that he would never do it. And then if he did it, it would cause chaos around the Middle East. He did it without any chaos, and we see now we are all looking at it quite naturally that the embassy of the United States is rightly in Israel's capital, in Jerusalem. So here, not trying to take away any of this outlandishness of the proposal and also the way it was done, I would say it's a typical Trump-esque. And probably if we look at other issues that he was dealing with and proposals that he made, they were all kind of shocking ones, whether towards Panama Canal or Greenland or Mexico or Canada. It also seems like a consistent way or method of negotiation, setting a very high bar and then negotiating it down, or also compelling people to think otherwise. Okay, Trump would say, you don't think it is viable or feasible? Tell me what you think is And don't come with me with the same old solutions that have been circling for the last 30 or 40 years. 6 American presidents were dealing after the Oslo Agreement with these two-state solutions to no avail. So here he comes, looking at it in a very fresh way. And also, I would say, if I take it down to the operational, to the ground zero, he looks at it, and I think he has a great experience as a builder, as a constructor. And he knows that there is no way you can live in Gaza as it is now. As he said, it's a demolition site. On top of that, you have a few thousand dozens of munitions that did not explode, that can explode anytime. It's very, very dangerous. And he knows in order to build it right, you have to clear the area, build it, and then probably there is a chance for the population to come back or not. But so far, since he made this declaration, he doubled down, and his people are also doubling down, saying that he's serious about it. And if people do not agree with that, they should come with different ideas.
Jonathan, Benjamin Netanyahu looked a bit surprised, even smiling too. But was he in the loop on this kind of idea? What does it mean for him? We know what Bezalel Smotrich and Itamar Ben-Gvir would think of a plan like this. How does this all fall on the Prime Minister right now?
You mentioned Ben-Gvir and especially Smotrich. They are two very interesting figures. And Smotrich, the finance minister, still in the coalition, was the first one to say that he got a call from Benjamin Netanyahu this afternoon. Now, let's look at the broader picture. In less than a month, at the beginning of March, Bezalel Smotrich will have to take a very big decision if Israel proceeds with the second stage of the ceasefire. If the ceasefire goes into effect and Israel goes into the second stage, releasing all the hostages, but also ending the war, withdrawing all of the Israeli forces. Smotrich already said that in this case, he will join Itamar Ben-Gvir, leave the coalition, and in this case, the coalition will probably fall simply because Ben-Gvir and Smotrich together have enough fingers to bring it down. But will Bezalel Smotrich want to bring down a government which Benjamin Netanyahu can now sell him the idea that the Israeli right wing can now get the dream that it has always wanted, a Gaza empty of Palestinians? Will it happen? Will it not happen? I don't know. Nobody knows. I don't think even Donald Trump knows. But the idea is there. So Benjamin Netanyahu can now come to Smotrich and tell him, you will now be leaving the coalition when we are just on the verge of making our dream become true. And Smotrich will perhaps be able to sell that to his own party members, to his own voters, saying, yes, we know we did say we will leave the coalition in this case, but look, we're about to have this dream of ours come true. Interesting thing there to do. I don't know what Donald Trump will do. I don't know what Bezalel Smotrich will do, but that's something that is circling around.
Fascinating dynamics indeed. Stay with us, gentlemen. We've got much more to discuss, but right now let's take a deeper look at the reaction to this controversial plan across the Middle East itself. More in this report.
The U.S. will take over the Gaza Strip.
Donald Trump's bombshell announcement of his plans to take over and own Gaza after resettling Palestinians outside the Strip has sparked outrage across the Arab world. His vision of Gaza as an American Riviera of the Middle East goes directly against Palestinian aspirations for statehood in Gaza, the West Bank, and East Jerusalem. Many Palestinians also see all of so-called historic Palestine, including modern Israel, as their homeland.
Even airstrikes couldn't force them to leave. Do they really think they could force them to leave? Not in their wildest dreams. We shall not leave our land even if they brought all the tanks in the world.
In Ramallah, Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas strongly rejected Trump's plan.
This land is a Palestinian land. It's the international law. It's the Arab Peace Initiative. We are against any occupation, whether Israeli occupation or American occupation. We are living in our country, in our state, in our land, and we will not leave forever.
Trump's announcement on Tuesday came as a shock to many, as he had previously only floated relocating Gazans to Egypt and Jordan. Both countries have vehemently rejected the idea, though Trump insists they will do it. He also claimed Saudi Arabia didn't demand a Palestinian state as a condition for normalizing ties with Israel. But Riyadh swiftly denied that, saying its position was non-negotiable and not subject to compromises. And while Saudi Arabia stopped short of directly condemning Trump's new Gaza plan, it responded by rejecting any Israeli settlement policies, land annexation, or attempts to displace the Palestinian people from their land.
And now joining our panel, Ali Waked, I24 News senior editor, and still with us, Danny Ayalon, former Israeli ambassador to the US, and security analyst Jonathan Regev. Ali, thank you so much for joining us. Many asking, even in the studio, is Donald Trump serious? Is this for real? But we want to hone in on the Arab reaction right now, and many asking, the issue is on the table, whether it's real or not. What is holding Arab nations back from welcoming or opening their doors to Palestinian refugees from Gaza right now?
I know that the Israelis, mainly the Israeli leadership, like to say always that the Palestinians are problematic, and this is why the Arab countries are not enthusiastic and are not willing to host them and to accept them. I will say the following. It is true that the Arab regimes don't like the idea that the Palestinian will be part of their population, and it's not the Arab people. It is the Arab regime for the simple reason. The Palestinians were always, they belonged always to, traditionally belonged to political streams that did not conform with the policies of the Arab regime. The Palestinians were whether Marxist, leftist, or Islamist, or even pan-Arabist. And all these three big streams, whether communism or Arab nationalism or Islamism, don't go good with the policies that the Arab regime. This is on one hand. On the other hand, it is true that the Arab countries has in mind what the Palestinians did in the Hashemite kingdom in the 60s, late 60s, and 1970. Of course, the peak at the clashes in September, what the Palestinians like to call the Black September, when the Hashemites thought that the Palestinians' attack against Israel are threatening the regime, the existence of the regime, and the fact that Palestinians are planning to take over the regime, or the Palestinian experience in the 80s in Lebanon, where the Palestinians used the Lebanese territory in order to carry attack against Israel. Israel retaliated in an invasion in Lebanon in 1982, which endangered the delicate demographic balance of Lebanon. These are reasons why the Arab countries are not really enthusiastic. For example, when we talk about some radicalism in the 70s of the states in the Gulf, who were the teachers in the Gulf at the time? The Palestinians. The Palestinians were teaching in Kuwait, were teaching in Bahrain, were teaching in Saudi Arabia. They brought with them all these ideologies, whether it is Islamist or communist or socialist or liberal, and this is why the regime in place don't like this experience to be repeated because of Trump plan. But I think there is a unanimity that one of the goals of this Trump plan is to push the Saudis to say, we will not ask for a Palestinian state in order to normalize with the Israelis. For the moment, we will normalize, but let's stop this plan.
An important tactic and strategy right now. That said, looking at the footage of what Gaza looks like right now, demolished, the footage is difficult to look at. If people were given the opportunity right now to leave Gaza, to get safe passage out of the Palestinian enclave, broadly speaking, would people take it?
Absolutely, but I think that we're not talking about more than tens of thousands of people among two plus million people. And I'm talking mainly about the young generation who for the moment doesn't see any horizon, any future in the Strip. This is why they are willing to immigrate. I think that the real danger is the Egyptian will declare that they open the Rafah cross border and whoever wants to live Gaza Strip can live. The question is also, Benita, who will accept them? Will they be illegal immigrants in the European countries that are not really? There is no interest for a young Gazan to go to an Arab poor country. If he wants to live, he will absolutely want to go to a better place, which means Europe, and the European will not accept them at this moment.
Well, Donald Trump seems confident that Egypt and Jordan will change their mind down the line. It depends, I suppose, what he is offering, what is on the table. We will be watching. Ali Waked, appreciate you being here in studio. Thank you for your insights. Now, to the U.S. plans around the Iranian threat right now. President Donald Trump signing an executive order renewing what he calls maximum pressure on Tehran to stop it from reaching nuclear capabilities. He says the U.S. is not going to attack Iran. Instead, he wants a nuclear deal. And he has a plan in place if Iran tries to assassinate him. More in this report from Emma Siegel.
Using words like maximum pressure and obliterate, U.S. President Donald Trump has made very clear his position on Iran.
Today, I also took action to restore a maximum pressure policy on the Iranian regime, and we will once again enforce the most aggressive possible sanctions, drive Iranian oil exports to zero, and diminish the regime's capacity to fund terror throughout the region and throughout the world.
On Tuesday, Trump said that he would like to make a deal with Iran to improve bilateral relations, but signed what he called a, quote, very tough directive restoring his sanctions campaign on Tehran in order to stop it from obtaining a nuclear weapon. But while Trump described it as a tough decision as he signed the executive order, he also added strong words against the Islamic Republic if it tried to have him assassinated.
Well, they haven't done that, and that would be a terrible thing for them to do, not because of me. If they did that, they would be obliterated. That would be the end. I've left instructions. If they do it, they get obliterated. There won't be anything left.
Later, in a presser with visiting Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, they reiterated their joint goal against a nuclear Iran.
They cannot have a nuclear weapon. It's very simple. I'm not putting restrictions. They cannot have one thing. They cannot have a nuclear weapon. And if I think that they will have a nuclear weapon, despite what I just said, I think that's going to be very unfortunate for them. If, on the other hand, they can convince us that they won't, and I hope they can, it's very easy to do. It's actually very easy to do. I think they're going to have an unbelievable future.
We also see eye to eye on Iran. That's the same Iran that tried to kill us both. They tried to kill you, Mr. President. They tried through their proxies to kill me. We're both committed to rolling back Iran's aggression in the region and ensuring that Iran never develops a nuclear weapon.
With maximum pressure restored, Trump's renewed sanctions and firm stance on Iran set the stage for what's to come in U.S. foreign policy.
So for more reaction, we now welcome Norman Rule, former senior U.S. intelligence official and senior advisor at United Against Nuclear Iran, joining us from Washington. Thank you so much for your time. So President Donald Trump says reports that the U.S. in conjunction with Israel is going to blow Iran into smithereens are greatly exaggerated. He's taken to his network Truth Social to say he would prefer a verified nuclear peace agreement which will let Iran peacefully grow and prosper. So what do you make of this message? Tell us your insights.
Good evening to you and to your viewers. President Trump issued, in essence, two messages yesterday to various sets of audiences. The first message was the restoration of maximum pressure through an executive order. And the characteristics or the elements of that maximum pressure order are significant. It specifically cites the need for China to cease its oil purchases. It talks about Iran's regional adventurism. It talks about terrorism, missiles, et cetera, and of course, the nuclear program. It is significant, and it is now a matter of U.S. policy that will be executed to include at the United Nations. At the same time, he has messaged the Iranian people, the region, and Europe that he is not looking for an immediate conflict with Iran, and Iran has the opportunity to make decisions which will avoid that. It's an appropriate approach for foreign policy because it, in essence, creates a debate within Iran's leadership. What do we want to do? Keep the Quds Force in a nuclear program or turn a new chapter in our relationships with the world? It also tells the Europeans, if you pressure Iranians and Iran conducts certain activities, stops certain activities, we have peace. But if they don't, we will punish your companies as well if they deal with Iran.
And at the same time, he also has this plan in place if Tehran tries to assassinate him that will involve Iran being obliterated. Those are his words. What do you make of that? What kind of response do you expect when the Iranians are listening to this kind of rhetoric?
I think the Iranians and their proxies understand that President Trump is not to be trifled with, that President Trump is quite serious, that if terrorism is conducted against the United States, be the target the president himself or others, or against U.S. warships in the Red Sea, there will be a very different response from the last administration. And this response is likely to be direct against Iran. And I think that, again, is part of the dynamic of creating a debate within Iran itself. Where do we want to go? But here's the challenge for the Iranians. What do you do with the Quds Force if there's a deal? What do you do with the Revolutionary Guard, which has its only purpose is to protect and push out the revolution? So the Iranians would have to undertake a political change, a change of their political DNA to achieve this deal. But the president is saying, over to you. We can be friends or otherwise, but the Iranians will make that choice.
Norman, deal or no deal, and we wait to see how it all unfolds. Iran still wants to annihilate Israel, many suggesting there's this window period right now to attack Iran's nuclear program. What is your take? If action isn't taken now by the US, by Israel, by both, there could be regrets down the line. Briefly, please, your thoughts.
That's possible, but Israel has an extraordinarily potent military and intelligence service, as does the US. The idea that somehow Iran can build some sort of defense that will overcome the extraordinary capabilities of Israel in the long term is difficult for me to think. So I think there will be many opportunities for Israel to protect itself if that need is necessary.
Norman Rule, former senior U.S. intelligence official and senior advisor at United Against Nuclear Iran. Always appreciate your insights live from Washington on The Rundown. Thank you. And now we're taking a very quick break, but when we get back, our coverage continues. How is the Palestinian Authority responding to Donald Trump's shock plans for Gaza as the US president outlines plans to develop the Riviera of the Middle East? And what is he saying about settlement expansion in the West Bank down the line? Stay with The Rundown. Back in just 2 minutes.
Started on October 7th, but for many, the horror may never end. With homes destroyed, families displaced, hostages missing, soldiers fallen, and a country traumatized. In the first year alone, more than 17,000 Israelis have been wounded, and hundreds of thousands have experienced psychological trauma and need support now. Thankfully, for 112 years, Hadassah hospitals have been on the ground healing. At our expanding Gandel Rehabilitation Center, we're providing critical physical therapy and life-changing mental health services.
Hadassah is a great place.
Today I'm really thankful.
Now, some are back home, living their lives, but many more still need our help. Help your family and friends heal at Hadassah hospitals. Give today.
You live in Israel or you are preparing for your Aliyah? Congratulations. You have a smartphone? Perfect. Download the Olim app for free and discover everything we have to offer. Booking medical and administrative appointments, bills paying, debt verification, instant translation, contractor recommendation, request tracking, and much more. And if you can't manage it on your own, our team speaks your language and assists you with all your procedures in Israel, starting from 199 shekels per month, unlimited and for the whole family. Don't hesitate any longer. Download the app or contact us.
Bad posture. The ever-increasing hours we spend sitting, working, and even while trying to relax at home is twisting our vertebrae out of alignment and creating strain and pain on muscles, ligaments, and joints. A scientifically designed spine and back support device that uses precision biometric technology to perfectly align the back and spine for all-day comfort and support, creating perfect posture for your back every time you sit down. now features extra-wide acupressure comfort pads, as well as an extended height back panel for even more support, making it perfect for all body types. Also features a precision wing design that perfectly cradles your back and spine with amazing ergonomic support that leaves you feeling refreshed and energized even after sitting all day.
Welcome back to The Rundown. Our coverage continues as we focus on President Donald Trump's bombshell message from the Oval Office for the U.S. to take over Gaza and create what he calls a Riviera of the Middle East. His call to resettle almost 2 million Palestinians elsewhere, sparking widespread criticism, with Egypt and Jordan already saying no and regional heavyweight Saudi Arabia rejecting the plan outright. Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas calling for the United Nations to protect the Palestinian people, slamming the plan as a serious violation of international law. And when Donald Trump was asked if he'd support Israel annexing the West Bank, he said he'd make an announcement in the next 4 weeks. Still in studio, Danny Ayalon, former Israeli ambassador to the United States, security analyst Jonathan Regev, and joining us now, correspondent Balich Sladin. So Donald Trump is expected to make an announcement in the next 4 weeks. The issue of the expansion of settlements in the West Bank is such an emotional one, a divisive one. Talk to us about the response to the sentiment right now.
Yes, well, the Palestinian Authority, of course, is calling the whole Trump plan ethnic cleansing, and they're saying the same thing in regards to what Israel is doing right now in the West Bank, in regards to the evacuations that are happening in the camps such as Tul Karim and others in Jenin as well. So, of course, they are condemning this plan that Trump has announced, and they're doing it also with other Arab states. We have heard King Abdullah today, that was beside Mahmoud Abbas, that is visiting in Jordan today, saying that this is not acceptable, and they're all calling for the reconstruction of Gaza while the Palestinians are inside Gaza. That's what they are saying over and over again. The Egyptians are very firm on this issue, and they have even proposed a plan for the Trump administration reportedly over the past few days that they can actually help with reconstructing Gaza, but Gazans should stay inside the Palestinian territory, inside the Strip itself. Now, the annexation is not an easy thing just to say in a press conference like yesterday, although that also the whole plan is not easy. But we're talking about a territory that is 4 times of Gush Dan. We're talking about 2,000 square miles of territory. It's not going to be an easy task, security-wise and economical-wise, and of course everything that Israel has to do with this. But Trump can give a green light at least to the annexation of the Jordan Valley, for example, and some of the settlements, the Israeli communities inside the West Bank. And we can be talking about going back to the deal of the century that Trump has been talking about, or did talk about, in the first term. That's a possibility, but we'll need to wait and see what's going to happen in the next 4 weeks. Whether it's going to be actually official, telling Israel that you can actually annex some parts of the West Bank.
Interesting, the 4-week wait, because in that time, President Donald Trump, Danny Ayalon, is going to be hosting King Abdullah of Jordan, and he's also going to be hosting Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, and obviously much at stake, many questions about their potential roles. So far, they're saying no. How do you see it unfolding?
Well, there's no doubt the knee-jerk reaction of all the Arab countries is against removing Palestinians, certainly not accepting them in their own states, as just Ali Waqid said in the section before. And he mentioned how agitators they were against any country they were hosted by, whether it was Jordan or Lebanon. I would add Kuwait, 1991 Kuwait, when Kuwait was invaded by Saddam Hussein. The few hundred thousands Palestinians, workers in Kuwait who were hosted by the Kuwaitians, sided with Saddam Hussein against their own hosts. So there is, I would say, a stigma about not having the Palestinians come in. Also, quite frankly, if you look into the interest of the Arab countries, they would not like to see an independent Palestinian state. I've heard it many times, of course, in closed rooms, because they do not want to see a Palestinian state, which the stipulation, the condition for a Palestinian state is that they are democratic. If Palestine is a democratic country, their own people would want democracies, and this is a mortal danger to the regimes. Also, if it's not a democratic country, it could very well turn into a failed state, and that could be a springboard of terror, where Iranians can come in, ISIS, and the sort. So Trump will hear a resounding no from both the Egyptian and Jordanian leaders, but is there a leeway to negotiate? We'll have to wait and see can they get in return. They actually rely on American power to stay in their own power, both regimes in Egypt and in Jordan. I think also the Saudis will have a lot to say behind closed doors. And again, it's a open, wide field for many, many eventualities. We'll have to wait and see.
Many obstacles indeed, but it did seem, Jonathan, that Saudi-Israeli normalization was just a step away. Your assessment of how the developments really in the last 24 hours could impact that eventuality?
A step away, but a very big step away, because in order to head to that normalization, Israel would have to make at least give some kind of a horizon for a Palestinian state. Whether it's steps on the ground or at least some kind of a statement that would go into that direction. Is this something that the far-right parties, which still hold this coalition, would agree to? I would say no. I think that a path or sort of a roadmap for a Palestinian state is something that for Itamar Ben-Gvir and Bezalel Smotrich, that for them would be even worse than going into the second stage of the Gaza ceasefire, because that would hurt their main base for their voters, which is of course the West Bank settlements. So I think that this government, in its current formation, I don't think can go forward with anything regarding the Saudi normalization, something that Benjamin Netanyahu would love to see. But with the current government, he cannot do that. Of course, he can always, we know that Benjamin Netanyahu is still considered a political magician here, so he can always turn to the coalition, to the opposition, to Benny Gantz, to Yair Lapid, and tell them, look, we have a very big option here. They maybe can assist him with the Saudi normalization. They surely will assist him with the Gaza ceasefire that will bring the hostages back. But there are many other agendas on the coalition's table. We're not even speaking about the draft bill for the Orthodox, for example. Will the opposition help him with that? The answer is no. Therefore, Benjamin Netanyahu will have to be very careful with his political movements. How will he do it? I don't know.
Certainly we'll have to wait and see, and the reaction within the Israeli political echelon is going to be fascinating. And talking of which, just a short while ago, Israeli ambassador to the United Nations, Danny Danon, saying that Palestinians should not be forced out of Gaza. And he says, quote, I think we should agree that it should require consent. Ambassador Danny Ayalon, a very measured response there from the ambassador.
Yes, and I think a very smart one, because if indeed the plan of Trump is to take effect, Israelis should not be in the lead, because it will be counterproductive for obvious reasons. So the less Israelis talk about it, the more it is an American plan, would be better for the plan if indeed it will take place. There is another issue here which also will emerge, I'm sure, pretty soon. The fact that there are 6 million refugees of Syria who left Syria because of, poor conditions over there and life-threatening situation, which is no different than what's happening in Gaza. So there was no, of course, any pipsqueak about them leaving. Here, everybody's pouncing on it because we know for a fact that for decades, Arab countries and the Palestinians used this card, the Palestinian card, as a political weapon against Israel, and still nothing has changed. I would say the sad thing is that the whole world is moving forward, and the Palestinians always stay behind because they have refused so many offers and so many plans, which would not have been the ideal for them, but would not have been ideal for Israel either. But they were not ready to compromise, and we see that every step of the way, they're losing more and more.
Just to this point, a recent polling, not recent actually, but June 2024, in the midst of the war, Meshkaki, who is a notable pollster in the Palestinian territories, found that 44 Palestinians in Gaza are willing to consider migrating outside of Gaza. I would think that this number has risen also in effect of the recent events in Gaza as well. So maybe, of course, Danny Alon is smart to say that, and I guess that the Trump administration wouldn't also be involved in forced deportation of Palestinians after all. So I think that we're still talking about a plan that is still too young. We still don't know anything about it, actually. Many factors are here, de-radicalizations of Palestinians. Is the IDF is going to take over first Gaza and get rid of Hamas first, and then the Americans will come? Many things and many questions are still have no answer.
As you say, Danny Danon, the UN ambassador, the Israeli ambassador to the UN, saying that Palestinians should not be forced out of Gaza. The debate is going to continue right now. It's clear that Donald Trump has taken the wheel, and we wait to see the road ahead. Gentlemen, stay with us. Much more to discuss because investigations continue into the fatal terror shooting at a checkpoint in the West Bank on Tuesday, in which 2 soldiers were killed and 8 were wounded in a surprise early morning ambush. Palestinian media saying today that the gunman, Mohammed Darahmeh, was the brother of an Islamic Jihad commander from the Tubas battalion who was killed by the IDF a year ago. The IDF has yet to confirm these details. The US Defense Department is reportedly drafting plans to withdraw all US troops from Syria. President Donald Trump and officials close to him recently expressing interest in pulling American troops out of Syria, leading Pentagon officials to start drawing up plans for a full withdrawal in the coming months. New National Security Advisor Mike Waltz meeting with US Central Command in Florida in recent days. Now, when asked about plans for Syria, Donald Trump saying Syria is its own mess. They don't need us involved. Danny Ayalon, you were talking about Syria. Your take on that message from Donald Trump right now. He knows where he wants to be involved. He certainly knows where he doesn't.
Yeah, this is not the first time. Remember that in his first term, he also wanted to get out the Syrian, the American troops, which mostly are protecting the Kurds on the northeastern side of Syria, bordering with the Turks. The Turks are actually hunting down many of the Kurds. So this is going to be a real blow for the Kurds, unless there are some assurances that the Americans would be willing to give to these Kurds. And quite frankly, Israel is also here, is an interested party, because indeed, if the Americans are not in Syria and the Turks are coming in full force, and we have seen the new meetings of the Syrian leaders in Damascus, and also offering them training and building a new military force of Syria by Turkey, building Turkish bases. So this is basically replacing Iran by Turkey. I'm not sure which one is a better situation. So I think the U.S. will have to look into it very seriously and give many assurances and have fallback positions in case everything in Syria falls down, especially the situation with the Kurds, if they are being just massacred.
Transitional Syrian leader Ahmed al-Shara meeting with Recep Tayyip Erdogan, sparking much concern about their security plans down the line. Certainly the whole region will be watching. Stay with us, gentlemen. We turn to another top story, and Romy Gonen has made her first public comments since she was freed from terror captivity, saying she came out of the darkness into the light. The 24-year-old Israeli civilian was abducted from the Nova Festival on the 7th of October and was held by terrorists for 471 days. She was released on day one of the first phase of the current ceasefire hostage deal. Her first words to her father were, "Dad, I am back alive." Known for her love of leopard print clothing, she thanked those involved in efforts to bring her home, saying thanks to family and friends, she was able to maintain her sanity and faith. Romy says her recovery journey starts now and she will have many more surgeries and treatments ahead. But the important thing is that she is home. She also says her rehabilitation will not be complete until all 79 hostages still held in Gaza are all back home. Meanwhile, the fate of those 79 hostages still held in terror captivity remains unclear. Hamas is set to release the names of the 3 Israeli men it's set to free on Saturday, 24 hours before the handover, all part of phase 1 of the ceasefire deal. Now, earlier in the day, all 5 observation soldiers discharged from hospital. They've been treated at Beilinson Hospital since their release from more than 15 months in terror captivity. Naama, Liri, Karina, Daniela and Agam each planted a tree at the hospital gardens before heading home at last. What a moment. So for more, we cross to our correspondent Robert Swift. He joins us from Hostage Square in Tel Aviv. So special to see footage of those brave young women heading home from hospital. Also today, Romy Gonen releasing her first public message since she was freed from captivity after 471 days, Rob. Separately, new details emerging about the extent of her hand injury. What are you learning?
Yeah, that's right. So the information from Romy came on an Instagram post that she herself published, but it was also through an interview that her mother, Merav, has conducted. That more information came out, particularly with regards to her injuries. Now, she suffered a gunshot wound to her right arm on October the 7th during her capture, and this is a wound that went untreated for months. It's understood that while she was inside the tunnels inside Gaza, she was carrying this wound and received very limited medical care. Now, her mother has said that as a result of this, she doesn't currently have the use of her hand, and as we heard in the Instagram post, Romy expects to go through numerous surgeries in the near future and physiotherapy. So at this stage, it's unclear what sort of recovery she's likely to have, but for the minute, there remains a serious injury.
Surrounded by family, hopefully that certainly helps on her road to recovery. Rob, 3 more hostages are set to be freed from captivity on Saturday, all part of phase 1 of the deal, but there's still much concern about phase 2, whether it will even happen. What are you hearing?
Yeah, there's a lot of concern that phase 1 will not automatically lead into phase 2. Now, the negotiations to begin that process from 1 to 2, they have begun, and so there is hope that that will be the case. However, of course, there are multiple pressures on this. There are members of the Israeli government who don't sound particularly keen on going into the next stage. And of course, Hamas itself has an incentive not to go into this phase because it would lead to the release of all remaining male hostages. Now, there is a fear that Hamas essentially at that point will have no cards left in their hand, and so that they also will not go into want to go into phase 2. Added to this is the comments from US President Donald Trump last night, which again is adding to the concerns with regards to the continuation of the negotiation. Now, this evening we've spoken, I spoke with a mother whose son is inside Gaza, and she said that with regards to how she feels about the president's comments, she's both struggling to exactly understand what they mean and also concerned for the implications, for the impact this will have on her son and all the other 79 hostages still held inside Gaza. At the moment, it is unclear she said it's unclear how to respond. The Hostages Families Forum, they actually cancelled a press conference that was due to take place immediately after the press conference between Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Trump, where those comments were made by the US President. So the messaging coming from the hostages families is, we don't really understand how to respond to this, and they're waiting and will respond in due time.
An agonizing wait indeed. Correspondent Robert Swift, live from Tel Aviv. Thank you very much for that update. Still in studio, correspondent Balir Sladin, you've been covering this war throughout. You've been covering the hostage releases throughout. To think that all the developments in D.C. could somehow negatively impact the release of hostages down the line is excruciating to process. What are you hearing? What are you learning?
Yes, just a short while ago, an Israeli official said that the Americans are ensuring the hostage families, or the families of the hostages, that this will not affect the current dynamics in the first phase of the deal, which means that the first phase of the deal will continue. But we've heard also, of course, the president yesterday saying that he does not have any guarantees that the second phase of the deal will go through. Now, I'm hearing something else also from Hamas, and it went, no one actually did talk about the Hamas's comments on the accusations actually toward Israel that they are withholding caravans from entering Gaza. They have said that if Israel continues with this holding of these caravans, then they will take measures as well. They will take steps in that regard, which means that maybe they're trying to also have some leverage over Israel in order to, at some point, say that we don't want to give you the list of the next hostages. We will not release the next 3 hostages this Saturday or the Saturday that is after. And add to that, of course, that now they might be, of course, saying that unless the Trump administration drops this new plan, we will not release any hostages. So there is a lot of concern that what the recent developments will actually lead to the current deal to collapse, and somehow many hostages will stay in Gaza. That's, of course, devastating for the families, but that's part of this whole process of negotiations for the second and the third phase of the deal, and also about post-war Gaza, which is exactly what the Trump's plan is trying to figure out.
Well, talking of Trump's plan, he said the U.S. would get somewhat more violent if Hamas did not release all of the hostages, in his words, because they would have broken their word. Security analyst Jonathan Regev, that's a very clear message to a terror organization from the White House.
Absolutely. It seems as if Hamas is now given the message, maybe for the first time, that there's something to lose. Because up until now, with everything that was happening in this war, it was clear that at the end Hamas is the governing body in Gaza. And we see it practically every Saturday. We see how much control Hamas still has there. Every time, every hostage release, we see the stages and how Hamas basically controls the whole act. Now comes an American president and says, you, Hamas, you may have something to lose. So do I think that this plan is realistic? Is it going to happen? Do we know that? We don't know that. But we do know that someone is telling Hamas, there is a plan in which you will lose. You will lose the control here, as opposed to now. At least up until the moment, not even Israel came up with a plan that says Hamas will be out. It has been stated, but there's not been any plan. Now Donald Trump says something different.
Parting thoughts, Danny Ayalon, on what Donald Trump can do at this juncture to help make sure that all the hostages get to come back home.
I think given the experience we've had, the soft approach of Biden, Trump is doing the opposite, thinking that he might achieve more, and I hope he will.
Certainly, the whole nation is holding its breath. The whole nation is watching. Danny Ayalon, Jonathan Regev, Balir Sladin, appreciate you all being here on The Rundown. Thank you so much, as always. Changing gears now. Years after an ancient Iraqi city was destroyed by ISIS, reconstruction is finally underway. More in this report by our Alex Schloss. Take a look.
After years of delay due to conflict and funding restraints, restoration efforts at Iraq's ancient city of Nimrud are underway. Back in 2015, ISIS militants demolished the ruins at Nimrud as part of the caliphate's broader assault on Iraq's cultural heritage, deemed to be un-Islamic in their fundamentalist interpretation of Islam. A year later, Iraqi military forces retook the 3,000-year-old site on the banks of the Tigris River early in their campaign to drive the jihadists out of the Mosul area.
Thousands of artifacts have been collected, and these require time to be organized and returned to their original locations, to repair the damage caused by the explosions to the great winged bulls and winged lions. The work will not stop, God willing, until the site is fully restored to its original state.
The Mosul Antiquities Department, in cooperation with and supported by the Smithsonian Institution Research Institute in the United States, is working to reassemble the damaged artifacts and restore them to their original glory.
This city consisted of the Northwest Palace, where we currently are, and the city's ziggurat, as well as the Temple of Ishtar and the Temple of Nabu. Most of these sites were subject to explosions, in addition to the sweeping of the ziggurat. They will be restored, God willing, as part of the ministry's projects, along with the international support that is currently available.
Nimrud was built around 1250 BC, and 4 centuries later, it became the capital of the Neo-Assyrian Empire, at the time the most powerful state on earth, extending from modern-day Egypt to Turkey and Iran.
And with that, we wrap up this edition of The Rundown. I'm Benita Levine in Tel Aviv. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned.
You live in Israel or you are preparing for your Aliyah? Congratulations. You have a smartphone? Perfect. Download the Olim app for free and discover everything we have to offer. Booking medical and administrative appointments, bills paying, debt verification, instant translation, contractor recommendation, request tracking, and much more. And if you can't manage it on your own, our team speaks your language and assists you with all your procedures in Israel, starting from 199 shekels per month, unlimited and for the whole family. Don't hesitate any longer. Download the app or contact us.
This broadcast is brought to you by Israel Bonds, the most direct and impactful way to support Israel. Invest now at israelbonds.com. This broadcast is brought to you by Israel Bonds, the most direct and impactful way to support Israel. Invest now at israelbonds.com.
אחי, איזה חיוך! איזה חיוך!
to stay on top of the news no matter where you are? Introducing i24 News' brand new news website. On our website, you'll find all the latest articles, interviews, and live broadcasts. Everything you need to know right at your fingertips, whenever you want it. So what are you waiting for? Download the i24 News app today.
The 7th of October set in motion a chain of events. Today, Israel's enemies are severely weakened, but not defeated, and the balance of power is shifting. This region never rests. And for its own survival, Israel needs to keep its finger on the pulse. If you want to better understand, if you want to hear voices you won't hear elsewhere, then tune in daily to Middle East Now on i24 News.
Welcome to Jewish World Weekly on i24 News. I'm Emily Francis. Every week we'll focus on stories, issues, and personalities of Jewish interest here in Israel and in the diaspora as the global Jewish community. And we start our top 5 items in the Jewish world presented by Nicole Zedek. Hello, Nicole.
Thanks, Emily. Here are the top 5 items in the Jewish world this week. Ireland's Jewish leaders are criticizing President Michael Higgins for his, quote, inappropriate comments about Israel's war with Hamas during the country's Holocaust Memorial Day commemorations. Protesters were forcibly removed after turning their back on Higgins, who drew comparisons between the Holocaust and the war in Gaza. Prior to the commemorations, Irish Jews had already urged Higgins to remain apolitical out of respect to the victims of the Holocaust. A Polish woman returned around 1,000 items belonging to Jewish people from Auschwitz. The items include Judaica, children's toys, clothes, watches, and Torah scrolls, and were taken from the concentration camp by the woman's father, who worked as a cleaner at Auschwitz. The artifacts will now be displayed by the Auschwitz-Birkenau Museum. An inquiry by the Belgian government has found that the Belgian National Railway Company should not pay compensation to the descendants of Jews who were transported on its train tracks to concentration camps. The inquiry said the organization should apologize for its role in the mass deportations, but placed the, quote, collective responsibility of the trains on the complacent Belgian government and people. Jewish groups are slamming the ruling. A Jewish man has been jailed for 2.5 years for planning to attack a synagogue. Matthew Maurer was jailed alongside his accomplice, Christopher Brown, in a decision that's divided New York's Jewish community, with many feeling Brown took advantage of Maurer, who has PTSD and autism. Maurer has since undergone rehabilitation and apologized for his role in the plot. And finally, 14 people have been inducted into the International Jewish Sports Hall of Fame. Most notable, NBA legend and Orthodox Jewish convert Amari Stoudemire, iconic Argentinian soccer commentator Andres Cantor, and 1984 Olympic judo medalist Robert Berland are all on the list. The International Jewish Sports Hall of Fame has inducted more than 500 people from more than 30 countries since 1979. And those are all of the top 5 items in the Jewish world this week. Back to you, Emily.
Last week, Donald Trump was inaugurated as the 47th American president, with his inauguration featuring a speech by Yeshiva University President Rabbi Ari Berman. And his inauguration parade highlighted the plight of the Israeli hostages in captivity in Gaza, including some American Israelis. But according to most exit polls, American Jews voted overwhelmingly for his opponent, Kamala Harris. His vote share among the Jewish community increased from his showing in 2020. But now many American Jews are wondering what the next 4 years has in store. Joining me in studio now to talk about these issues and more is Ron Campias, the former Washington bureau chief for the Jewish Telegraphic Agency and a veteran journalist who has spent decades covering the Jewish world. Hello, and thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So a lot going on. To be a journalist for so many years, these are definitely times I think we haven't seen in American and Israeli history combining at the same time. So explain your views as a journalist, what direction you think this could go, especially as we saw what Elon Musk did, and he obviously came under a lot of criticism. Your thoughts on all that?
I think, you know, the first couple of weeks of the Trump administration, in terms of the Jewish community, Jewish voters, Jewish observers, they're going to be celebrating the release of the hostages, frankly. I think that was... they're going to see that. Obviously, it was a joint operation between the outgoing Biden administration and the incoming Trump administration, but it's going to be seen with some justification as Trump's victory. He said there would be hell to pay. I think that here in Israel, the people I've spoken to say that was translated more as something that Netanyahu had to listen to. And in any case, there are 7 hostages out. There are another 25 that could come out in the next few weeks, and that's what people are going to focus on. Longer term, I think there's just a lot of uncertainty. The Musk appointment, his influence in the administration, what that means, given the apparent Nazi salute, and as well as his backing for AfD, a party with roots in among neo-Nazis, that is going to disturb a lot of people. To what degree does President Trump heed that information? To what degree does he internalize it? To what degree does he reject it? I think that's going to be a preoccupation of the Jewish community going forward.
Yeah, for sure. And you know, what about the ADL's response? Kind of surprising. They weren't completely calling crying foul. We know that Musk has been here, and people close to him say this is not the case. So your response to ADL's response?
You know, I think ADL has to be cautious. They're dealing with a very powerful man in Elon Musk. They're dealing with a new administration. I think that a lot of people I saw on social media had what would have been more the traditional ADL response, which is that looked exactly like a Nazi salute. Maybe you didn't intend it as a Nazi salute, but you need to explain to us what went on there. And Musk has kept on trolling. He hasn't really explained what was happening when he made that salute. And he hasn't bothered to address, I think, a lot of the legitimate Jewish concerns, because a lot of other Jewish organizations in the States, the Jewish Council for Public Affairs, were very, very concerned by it. No, I don't know if anybody actually thinks that Musk himself is a Nazi or internalizes Nazi beliefs, but he is somebody who likes attention, obviously.
And it's not sensitive. I mean, even if it wasn't that, it's insensitive.
It's insensitive, and it was followed up by his comments at a conference recently that the Germans have had enough of remembering. It's time for them to forget, or remarks to that effect. Nobody's saying, I don't think there's a legitimate Jewish scholar or Jewish organizations that's saying that the visits of the great-grandfathers should be visited on the great-grandchildren, but they should definitely be aware of what went on in the past, just like any country that has, on whose name crimes have been committed, should be aware of what went on in the past.
So overall, Jews in the United States, what do you think? I mean, is there a hope, a trepidation? I mean, we know generally more Jews are vote left, but this is very complicated at times, different than what we've seen throughout American history.
Like I said, I think they're just in wait-and-see mode, and they're like a little worried about the signs that have come forward. I think that, like I said, I think there's going to be a lot of rejoicing because of the release of the hostages, but then you have the isolationist element of Trump's advisors coming through in terms of a senior official who was associated with the Quincy Institute, which was an organization that preaches isolationism, preaches like ramping down the confrontation with Iran. I think that the organizations that are more conservative, more hawkish, that hoped Trump would be more confrontational with Iran, they're kind of waiting and seeing now. They don't know whether that's going to play out.
All right. Thank you very, very much. Ron Campias, thank you for your assessment, as always. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
This week, on International Holocaust Remembrance Day, the world commemorates the 80th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz-Birkenau. This after 6 million Jews were killed in the Holocaust. A European Union delegation to Israel paid tribute to the survivors at a special Holocaust event in Herzliya in conjunction with Yad Vashem. Here's my report with survivors who are lighting up the path of remembrance.
profound honor for me to join you today at Beit Juliana as we mark International Holocaust Remembrance Day and commemorate the 80th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz-Birkenau.
An emotional celebration of survivors, mixed with a painful reminder of the horrors of the Holocaust.
You're living witnesses to history and the source of hope for all of us. Your voices urge us to ensure that never again is not just a pledge, but a reality.
The European Union delegation to Israel and Yad Vashem converged at Herzliya's Bet Juliana Assisted Living Center, home to several Holocaust survivors.
My parents, they give me to a non-Jewish family to keep me, and they try to escape to Swiss. And when they should come back, they will pick me up, but they didn't came back. I was 1 year, and when the war finished, I was 4 years.
My dad was originally a journalist who in 1933 wrote against the Nazis. They looked for him immediately, and his neighbor told him, "Leave quickly and take your suitcase." They managed to get on the last truck that brought soldiers from the border, and they arrived in Brussels, where I was born.
The reality of war coming full circle literally landed on Bet Juliana's doorstep on Yom Kippur. Hezbollah fired a drone into Israel that hit Rachel Fish's apartment, a reminder of the fragility of life.
After things started heating up for Jews, my mom's best friend contacted her and said, "You know, we are not gonna forget you." Her husband's partner in Bruges agreed to hide us, which was dangerous to his family and to us. We lived in the attic of their home.
The crowd was also entranced by the film documenting the miraculous journey of Yaakov Wexler Waskenel. Yaakov's Jewish parents made the most difficult choice, one that saved their son's life and soul.
I know for sure that on March the 25th, 1943, my Jewish mother brought me to the window of my Polish mother's house. And I was around 8 days old. I thought they were my real parents until I was 49 years old. They were always my beloved parents. Stopping her tears, my mother told me everything. She simply said that I was a child of Jewish parents. I didn't imagine it was to such an extent.
Yaakov committed his life to the church, becoming a priest on his own volition. But it's something he later found out fulfilled the wishes of his dying mother, who saved her son by martyring herself.
Anyway, it was a deep pain when my mother told me about the wishes of my Jewish mother. Therefore, I felt very close to him, to Jesus. I felt a deep gratitude for being Jewish. It rose to life like a volcano, erupted like a volcano with all its might. But the fact that I'm Jewish was something big.
So big that Yaakov made Aliyah to Israel, found relatives he didn't know existed, and devoted himself to rediscovering his Jewish roots and beyond.
In 2009, I came to Israel, not as a new Jewish immigrant, because I was a priest. I found work at Yad Vashem, where I worked for 13 years until last year when I retired.
At the tender age of 76, Yaakov officially became a man, having his bar mitzvah with Israel's chief Rabbi Lau. And his Polish adoptive parents, Amelia and Piotr Waskenel, were recognized as righteous among the nations. A glimmer of hope that there is humanity even in the darkest of times.
We Europeans consider it a sacred duty to condemn and repudiate the factories of death that the Nazis and their local collaborators set up in our continent and beyond, with the sole goal to annihilate every single Jew they could find.
Do you feel hope for the future for the Jewish people and for Israel?
There are days that I don't have hope, and then few days later, I have hope again. We passed so many things. I think we will survive. We have this country. We didn't got it for nothing. They said always in Europe, go to your country. That means go back to Israel. So we are here, we stay here, and I don't want to go to any other country.
אני מאמין שאלוהים
And I believe that God is with us. This is the God of Israel. I want there to be peace, not just in Israel, but across the whole world.
אבל בעולם.
Harrowing stories indeed, and there is a very real possibility that this could happen again. A study from the Conference of Jewish Material Claims has shown that the majority of adults around the world believe that a genocide against the Jewish people could happen again. Joining us now from Toronto is Honorary Professor Erwin Kotler, the International Chair of the Raoul Wallenberg Center for Human Rights and former Justice Minister and Attorney General of Canada. Thank you very much for joining us.
Good speaking with you.
So what do we make? We know that the anti-Semitism has only been rising globally in the wake of October 7th, not that it wasn't there before. So we're now seeing this in Canada in so many places you wouldn't even think about, not just large cities. What is the tide and how are Jews feeling being there?
Well, you know, at the end of 2022, when I was in the special envoy for combating anti-Semitism, I reported then that what we were witnessing was a mainstreaming, normalizing, legitimation of anti-Semitism in the political culture, the popular culture, entertainment, sports, and in particular, the campus culture. But most importantly, with an absence of outrage, with indifference and inaction in the face of that. And I think that was the backdrop to what happened post-October 7th. The embers were already burning before that. Then with October 7th, the horrific, unspeakable mass atrocities perpetrated not only by a terrorist organization, Hamas, but by an anti-Semitic genocidal terrorist organization. Not because I say so, but because they've said so in their founding charter, and since then, post-October 7th, said they would commit such atrocities again and again and again. One would have thought that this would have resulted in a uniform condemnation of anti-Semitism, in action against anti-Semitism. On the contrary, what we've seen has been a denial even that the atrocities have taken place. And what we've seen in Canada, for example, has been in the public squares, marches, support for such mass atrocities, justification of them, in fact, even celebration and glorification of them. And that's why, at this point, I think it has to be realized, I said this in a meeting with our Canadian Prime Minister not too long ago, that this anti-Semitism is not just threatening to Jews, it's toxic to democracies. It's an assault on our fundamental freedoms and on our, indeed, even national security. And as we've learned only too painfully and too well, that while it begins with Jews, it doesn't end with Jews.
Yeah, and also a new study showed that a staggering number of adults didn't even know about the Holocaust. This includes half of young people, even in France, which is so insane to think about when so much energy is being put on Holocaust education. But is this kind of part and parcel of what we're seeing about the diluting of history and the experience of the Jewish people?
Yes, we had a similar report here in Canada, but with similar data that's repeated itself. That's why we've sought to make the teaching of the Holocaust in education, the Holocaust mandatory in high schools and the like. But it's not just about Holocaust education. We need education regarding anti-Semitism. You know, we're speaking now on International Holocaust Remembrance Day, which is, of course, the 80th anniversary of the liberation of the death camp Auschwitz, the worst extermination camp of the 20th century. Now, 1.3 million people were deported to the death camp Auschwitz. 1.1 million of them were Jews. Let there be no mistake about it. Jews were murdered at Auschwitz because of anti-Semitism. But anti-Semitism itself did not die in Auschwitz. It remains the bloody canary in the mineshaft of global evil today. And that is why, again, as I said in meeting with political leaders here in Canada, at this point, what we need are not just statements of condemnation. We need action. We need effective enforcement of the laws, etc.
So what kind of actions, if any, are being taken? Because like I said earlier, we are seeing violence like in Winnipeg, even as far as, you know, the western coast of Canada. Canada is a very, very big place with a lot of provinces. Are we seeing it everywhere in all the communities throughout Canada?
We're seeing it throughout Canada. We've had a dramatic rise in hate crimes targeting Jews and incendiary hate speech. Jews are 1% of the population of Canada, yet they are the targets of over 70% of religiously motivated hate crimes. And with regard to incendiary hate speech, here too, there is more hate speech targeting Jews than against any other and all other minorities combined. And that is why we need effective action, not just declarations from the government, not just performative tweets and the like, but in fact, when you have these demonstrations, they're not just pro-Palestinian demonstrations. Peaceful protest pro-Palestinian is fine. What we're seeing in the public squares, in the streets of Montreal and Toronto and Winnipeg, what we're seeing are pro-Hamas demonstrations, pro-Iran demonstrations. And each time these demonstrations take place, I can tell you as a former Minister of Justice, etc., that a half a dozen crimes under the criminal code are being committed, whether we talk about unlawful assembly, we talk about public incitement to hatred, etc. So what we need is effective enforcement of the laws. And what I recommended that the country do is have a national forum on anti-Semitism of an urgent character, bringing together federal, provincial, municipal governments, because they work in silos, bringing together prosecutors, law enforcement officials, and the like, so that we can not only have an action plan, but in fact implement it. We do have plans, they're not yet being implemented.
Wow. Well, if there's anyone who's the right person to push it through, it is you. Thank you very much. Honorable Professor Erwin Kotler, the International Chair of the Raoul Wallenberg Center for Human Rights, as well as former Justice Minister and Attorney General of Canada. Much appreciated. Thank you very much.
Not at all. Good speaking with you.
Jews make up less than 2.5% of the American population, but when it comes to business acumen, Jews are often viewed as punching above their weight, which may have led to Jewish business owners being left out of America's federal minority business community. Here's more from I-24 News senior U.S. correspondent Mike Wagenheim reporting that oversight has been remedied.
Jews are a minority. It seems like such an obvious statement, but Jews have not been classified as such when it comes to federal business benefits. That changed earlier this month when the Orthodox Jewish Chamber of Commerce signed a landmark memorandum of understanding with the U.S. Department of Commerce and its Minority Business Development Agency to include Jewish business owners among those minorities eligible for government contracts, loans, grants, and participation in educational and advancement initiatives.
There's endless, hundreds and hundreds of different programs that every single Jewish business is going to benefit from. This is very unique because as the Orthodox Jewish Chamber of Commerce, we focus on helping people in different industries, whether it's health, medical, real estate, expos, conferences, job placements, trainings. This is something that impacts everyone, every single business in the Jewish world in all 50 states.
Duvi Honig, the founder and CEO of the Orthodox Jewish Chamber of Commerce, told us that he's been building partnerships with other minority communities for years, and the MOU signed with the Commerce Department is a direct result of those relationships.
So I advocated for it a long time. I said, we need the Department of Commerce to work from the bottom up, not the top down. That's the only way we'll be able to help the American economy. And I brought 30 chambers, African American, Hispanic, diversified, 5 boroughs, West Coast, East Coast, and we had 30 top chambers, and I had over here a national roundtable in this room. So by being able to be inclusive for everyone, empower everyone, we were able to say, hey, what about me? And that was the approach that we were successful with, because we really mean it.
An influential politician from a Jew-heavy New Jersey district told us the impact in his community could be enormous.
Lakewood Township being the largest Jewish community in all of New Jersey, we have 10,000 students in the college there. Only a very small portion, like 5%, go in to become rabbinical teachers or rabbis. The other 95% go into business, entrepreneurship. They become CPAs, they become doctors, lawyers, and Indian chiefs as such. This will encourage them to stay in New Jersey, develop businesses, and qualify for dollars and cents, which is so important.
But one question is why? Why did it take so long for the federal government to make this happen?
It's the obvious answer, which is we're thought of because of the success of many people in our community. They forget about the people that don't always have the same advantages or talents, and so we get labeled, in the same way we get labeled, and unfortunately in many ways, in anti-Semitic ways, we get labeled as a group that doesn't need help.
While the memorandum was signed in the final days of the Biden administration, the Trump admin's incoming Deputy Commerce Secretary attended, showing a commitment to seeing the initiative through. The Minority Business Development Agency is now working on a new application to include Jewish-owned businesses for qualification as minority business enterprises, which will open the door to the wide range of the government benefits available. Reporting here from the Commerce Department in Washington, Mike Wagenheim, I-24 News.
Thank you all so much for watching Jewish World Weekly on I-24 News. Sure hope you enjoyed it. We'll be back next week with a brand new episode, but until then, shalom from Tel Aviv.